Alex Batty has spoken for the first time since returning to the UK after 6 years wandering around Europe. This is the 17-year-old who explained why he made the bold decision to run away from his mum, grandfather and their hippie lifestyle.
For the first few years when I was in Spain, it was a vacation really. Spending most days doing whatever I wanted, reading, drawing, going to the beach, spending time out. Just really just being on a vacation.
That was until around 14 where I started needing to pick up my own slack, work to help with food, rent. It was a lot of construction work, demolition work, decoration work, painting walls, renovation work.
I decided to come back to England when I was around 14, to be honest. I started weighing up the pros and the cons from each lifestyle. And after a couple of months of contemplation, I realised England was definitely the way forward. From the past few years, I could envision my future few years, and it really wasn't, it just wasn't the way forward, what was best for my future.
This is such an incredible story. He's now living with his nan and legal guardian, Susan Kurana. Batty is beginning the difficult process now of trying to rebuild a normal life despite having no formal education or friends for his entire adolescence.
Even now, just talking to people, it's kind of hard for me because I've not done it for such a long time, talking to people my own age.
Wow. Let's speak with psychotherapist Linda Dubrow-Marshall, who joins us now to discuss that tricky road ahead. Linda, good to have you with us. I mean, it's interesting that we understand he hasn't had a formal education. He sounds like quite a switched-on young man, I have to say.
Thank you so much for having me on. What an inspirational young man and so courageous. And even though he's lacking in his formal education, it's wonderful to see how he's been thinking for himself. He's been thinking for several years now about what he needed to do for his future. And I think that's really inspirational.
I mean, in terms of the transit, I mean, it's hard to kind of plot the story. We know what he's told us, that he, disappeared, and he doesn't, from what we understand, he doesn't want anybody to be in trouble for him leaving the country, although I think there are some legal considerations underway in that respect. But it's unconventional. But, I mean, who's to say it's wrong, I suppose, broadly speaking. He's had an experience. Time will tell quite how positive that experience was for him. He doesn't seem, certainly on the face of it, listening to his words and his turn of phrase, he doesn't appear to have been distressed by it. But maybe going forward, he will have different thoughts on that. I don't know. But, I mean, in terms of having a lifestyle that was the very antithesis of the one he's now gone into, how tricky is that for a young person to suddenly switch back to a very different routine?
Well, that's going to be very tricky. It's always an adjustment when people leave a high-pressure situation where they've perhaps been coercively controlled. And you can see, I can't really speak about Alex in particular because I haven't interviewed him or anything like that. We're just beginning to get information. But I can say in general, you can see that he's feeling loyalty toward people who perhaps broke the law in not sharing his whereabouts with the person that had custody. In our government, we have expectations that young people would have an education, and so they can be held responsible for that. So it's not a question of just an alternative lifestyle. It's a question of caring for a child's rights. And we have children that are being raised in groups and by individuals where they're not receiving a proper education and they're not mingling with the rest of society. And Alex's story is giving hope to many parents that I come in contact with who have a loved one who has disappeared into a different kind of lifestyle and who are wondering if their child, this particular child that maybe is in their family and that they love, will ever be able to think things through for themselves. And so that's what's really inspirational about it. But he will have the same integration problems that someone would have who was leaving a completely one culture to go back to a culture that's quite different. Someone that's leaving prison, even, that has to readjust to the changes in the culture. And so hopefully he will take his time gradually to reintegrate into education. It's going to be really important for him to catch up on his education so he can have a vocational future, a career. And it's going to be really important for him to catch up with his peers, to learn how to have peer relationships and relationships, to reestablish his relationships with his extended family and perhaps neighbors and other people in his community. And usually people in these situations also profit from some professional help as they're going through this reintegration period, which isn't to say that they're psychologically damaged, but just that they need help in readjusting and reintegrating into the society that he came from. Now, his advantage is that he came from this society. He'll remember things. He didn't leave until he was 11. So I think that will help him. And the fact that he's going back to a family member who's responsible for him and the love and warmth that he will receive, this will all help him as he goes forward in the days ahead.
I mean, you kind of think, assuming there isn't any, long-lasting psychological damage, and again, just to repeat it, he seems quite switched on. As you say, he'd had a life here before for 11 years, at an age where he will remember that. He's gone off and led this kind of almost nomadic lifestyle with his mum and grandfather for sort of half a decade. I mean, lots of people would envy that. They say, actually, do you know what? That in itself is an incredible education. And yes, he's got to catch up with the GCSEs and the A-levels and the maths and the English and all the rest of it. But assuming he can do that, and he seems a fairly bright chap, then, he's arguably had an experience that many people would pay for.
Well, it's one thing for an adult to decide that they want to drop out of the traditional society and have an alternative lifestyle. It's another thing to be a child and to be not, apparently not told exactly what was going on. It seemed like a vacation to begin with, he has explained to us.
Sure.
And for them not to have a say in what, as a society, we believe are the essentials. We believe it's essential for children to get a formal education up until a certain age, which he was deprived of. So that's the difference. So some people might envy that, but they haven't lived it.
Yeah.
He's lived it, and he learned what the limitations were for him.
Sure. Well, let's hope all turns out fine and dandy for him as well.
Absolutely.
Listen, Linda, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate that. Linda Dubrell Marshall,
Thank you for having me on.
psychotherapist with us here on talkTV.